Okay, so for part two of this series of videos, what we're going to do is import in a model and then set it up to be able to be grabbable. So in VR, you'll be able to reach out, grab it, and manipulate it. So that should be fun. So in order to do that, first thing I want to do is on the content folder, let's right click and create a new folder. I'm going to call this models. And from in here, so we've got this selected, let's go up and click the Add Import button, and then Import to Game Models. And then we're going to find wherever it is that you saved your Project3 resources folder. And once you're in there, you'll see that we've got a few models in here, a handful of textures, and some audio stuff. So the first thing I want to import in is the skull static. And open that. And we have our FBX import options. And for the most part, we're going to leave this as the default, but we are going to change one thing. This is kind of important. So under Mesh, the very top one, go ahead and click on this tiny little triangle to open up the sort of advanced options. And as we scroll down here, you'll see an option that says Combine Meshes. And we want to click True for that. Basically what that does is if there is an FBX file with multiple separate meshes in it, it will combine them all into one mesh when it brings it in. And this skull model has the skull and then a separate jaw, but we want them to be one single mesh when it comes in for this particular exercise. So we'll go ahead and click Import All, and now we have our skull and our skull material. Let's go, and then let's import in the textures, and we'll plug in all the textures into the material. So click Add Import, same thing, and then find all the textures with skull associated with them. It should be a base color, a normal, and a roughness. So this one's a little different. We haven't done a normal yet. So when we bring this in, you'll notice that it gives you a little message that said the skull normal was imported as a normal map. So there's a certain setting that gets checked in Unreal. And we'll just go ahead and click OK. So that Unreal knows that the texture you're bringing in is a normal map and it treats it a little differently. And it does it automatically if it thinks it's a normal map. So that's good, but it's a good thing to keep in mind in case that something goes wrong with that. So we've got all these things in. Let's just go ahead and click Save All. And let's double click on our skull and see the mesh. And then while we're in here, we can double click on the skull mat, and let's go ahead and build our material. And like we did with the exercises on Monday, just go ahead and delete that param. And we're going to drag our textures in here. Start with the base color. Let's plug that into base color. Go to roughness. Plug that into roughness. This should all be pretty familiar. And then finally we're going to drag in the normal. We're going to plug that into normal. Now, some of you who are familiar with video games or real-time graphics probably have heard the term normal map, but some of you may not have. So sort of the quick answer to what a normal map is it's a texture that defines how light hits a surface in greater detail than the surface. So what that means in English is it will add sort of detail to a surface that doesn't exist in the geometry. And it's a means of improving performance and visuals. So you can have a mesh that is low resolution in terms of fewer triangles, but it renders as if it was higher resolution because all the detail from a high resolution mesh has been baked into a texture, and the way that detail is expressed is through the way that the light hits it. I don't know if that makes any sense. Hopefully. And so we've saved that. Let's go ahead and look at our skull. And now we have texture on it, and you'll notice it's got some bumpies on it. So this isn't an actual displacement map. It doesn't change in 3D space, but it changes the way the light hits it. The light thinks it's 3D, and lights it accordingly. And the effect is good enough to basically fool your eye. It's a little trickier in VR because we have depth perception in virtual reality, which means that even if it's lighting as though there's a lot of geometry there, if our depth perception doesn't pick up a change in 3D space, it looks weird. So in VR, your best bet is to use normal maps for very small scale details that you won't really notice the change in depth, or to sort of reinforce geometric detail. And I'll talk about that, probably at another time. Let's go ahead and save this and exit out of here. Now we have our skull. You can drag it into the scene just as a static mesh. And check it out. Looks cool. One thing I want to do is cool down this light a little bit, because the scene's really blown out. So I'm just going to bump the intensity down to 5. Nope. Try 4. I kind of want this to be a spooky scene anyway, so we'll tweak the lighting more later. I'll go ahead and build it. But for now, just so it's easier to work with, I kind of want to bump that down. Okay. That's a little better. At least our skull's not blown out. And we can tweak the lighting more later. Click Save All. And now we have our skull in there, but if we were to view this in VR, we would notice that it's not interactive at all. It just kind of sits there. So what we want to do now is make this interactive. And the way to do that is, the simplest way to do that, let me rephrase that, is going to be to hijack the blueprint for the grabbable cube. So you'll notice in the default scene there's a cube that you can reach out and grab. So what we're going to do is hijack that and then just plug our mesh into it. And so go into VR template under content, go to blueprints, and then you'll find grabbable small cube blueprint class. Go ahead and click that and then right click it. And we're going to do duplicate. So we want to leave the original there, and we're going to duplicate it and modify the duplicate. And so let's change its name. It's got grabbable already, so we'll change the small cube to skull. Grabbable skull. Let's go ahead and open that up. So this should look kind of familiar to you guys. Here, actually let's save over here. You can see the sort of standard editor view. We can click on viewport and view the cube. And then we can click on construction script event graph. You'll notice that these are empty, because what's going on is this is actually pulling from this component called grab component. If we were to double click that, that's just down here, you'll see all the blueprint code that makes the grab happen. But we don't have to worry about this. We're not going to get into this stuff. But just so you know, here's where it is, and it plugs into this guy down here in components. So what we're going to do here is we're going to swap out the static mesh. And you'll see up here in viewport, we've got our static mesh, and in here in the components you can select the static mesh. And when that is selected, you'll see over here that we can swap these things out. So what we're going to do is, we're here where it says smcube01, click on that. Let's go ahead and select our skull static. And now we have a skull in here. Easy. One thing you'll notice is that the transform is set, so there's a scale of set to 0.3. Let's just go ahead and reset that. And now we've got a rather large skull with all sort of the blueprint goodies to make it interactive. So let's go ahead and compile that and close out of here. There's only one thing we need to check though. An essential part of it being grabbable is that there is collision on it. And so what we need to do, let's go ahead and save all. And let's go back up to our model. And then on the static mesh, let's just double click that and check the collision. And in order to do that, in here in the mesh editor, click the collision, and then just click simple collision. And you can see in green that we do have collision on it. And that's because in our import options, we have the import option set to attempt to generate collision. And what Unreal will do is attempt to generate a really simple collision for whatever you import in. So we've got that. Let's go ahead and go back to our blueprints and our grabbable skull. And let's go ahead and drag that into the scene. And you notice it looks exactly like our other skull, except this one is grabbable, or theoretically. Let's move this one out of the way. And save all. And let's test it. Alright, and so in order to test it, go up to play, make sure we're set to VR preview, and cross our fingers. Ooh, I'm inside my mesh. So this is the non-interactive one. And this is the interactive one. Everything goes according to plan. Should be able to reach out and grab this. And here we go. And once you release it, you'll notice it's going to bounce around a little bit when it falls down. Okay, so that's it for the skull. And so what I'd like you to do now is go ahead and basically repeat this process for another object, which is the candle holder. So go ahead, import that in, same place. See candle holder and then textures, and add the textures to the material. And notice it's a little different. There's no normal map, and there is a metal in this map, so you'll have to treat it a little bit differently, but you guys know how to do that. And once you're done with that, you'll have the skull and a candle that are both interactive, and it'll be time to move on to the next step.